overnight, we had 23 cases of community transmission. At this stage, 21 have been confirmed that are linked directly to the Avalon cluster. 2 are under investigation, although we suspect they're all linked to the Avalon cluster, and there were 7 in hotel quarantine. I want to thank the people of the Northern Beaches for coming forward and get tested, and I also want to thank them for the way in which they've restricted their activities, stayed at home unless they absolutely need to. However, as we foreshadow that the number of cases we've received till 8 o'clock yesterday, and I want to stress also that that 23 number includes the 10 that were reported earlier in the day yesterday. So that is inclusive of the 10 that were reported at 11 o'clock yesterday. So until 8 p.m. last night, there were 23 cases in the 24 hours previous to that, based on community transmission. And based on the likelihood that we're going to expect to see a repeat of those numbers across this 24 hours, given what we know from the testing and given what we know from the likely number of cases, we are going to put in health orders for the Northern Beaches from 5 o'clock today to essentially go back to the restrictions people experienced in March in relation to only leaving your home if it's for essential purposes, such as for work, for compassionate grounds, for exercise, or to go shopping. So we're going to put that health order in place until midnight on Wednesday, and that is to give all of us a chance to have a better Christmas than what would otherwise occur. So I want to thank the people of the Northern Beaches for their patience, but I also want to stress to them that from 5 o'clock today until midnight on Wednesday, they'll be asked to stay at home unless for the 4 essential reasons. Essentially, we'll be going back to the restrictions that were in place back in March, just for the Northern Beaches, for the local government area of the Northern Beaches. But we do want to stress that it's okay to go out and exercise, it's okay to go out and do essential shopping, so don't panic buy. Please, you can go shopping anytime. It's okay to go out and do work. It's okay to go out for compassionate grounds, including emergency medical treatment or anything else, or to visit an isolated relative, etc. So please know that those 4 basic reasons we had back in March, when we asked people to follow those restrictions, will apply to the Northern Beaches community only from 5 o'clock today until midnight on Wednesday, and we're hoping that will give us sufficient time to get on top of the virus so that we can then ease up for Christmas and the new year moving forward. For the rest of Sydney, can I please ask everybody to abandon non-essential activity until that time? We don't want the virus to spread outside of the Northern Beaches. We don't want perhaps unidentified strains of the virus outside of Sydney, outside of the Northern Beaches, to start getting to an extent which concerns us. So can I say to everybody in other parts of Sydney outside the Northern Beaches, please limit your activity. We're asking you to do this on good faith. We're asking you not to undertake essential travel, non-essential travel. We're asking you not to undertake non-essential activity. So if you were planning a night out tonight, we ask you to consider changing those plans and staying at home. We want people essentially to stay at home tonight and the next few nights so that we can ensure the virus doesn't spread if there are any fragments of the virus outside of the Northern Beaches. And we also want to make sure that we give all of Sydney the best chance we have to having a good Christmas. Now, if we find, I should say, to put everybody on notice, we will be considering today, after consulting obviously the relevant people, whether this time tomorrow we do revert back to some restrictions in Greater Sydney, but we are still considering that. I just want to put everybody on notice that that is a possibility, and that will depend on what the health advice says to us during the course of the day as events are evolving. Can I also stress our deepest gratitude to the hotel industry? The Hotel Association voluntarily has asked all of its hotels in the Northern Beaches to close for the next few days, and they've all done that voluntarily, and I want to thank the industry for that proactive move. They've been working with us closely, and it's wonderful to see them come forward and make that offer and suggestion to us in a bid to get this virus under control, because all of us know if we work hard together over the next few days, we have a better chance of making sure we don't limit activity moving forward. I also want to thank places of worship and churches in particular who've contacted the government to also proactively say that they've reverted to virtual activity over the next few days in the Northern Beaches community. So thank you to those organisations, businesses and community groups who've already come forward to make that point. I'll ask Dr. Chant now to go through the specifics of the medical advice and the cases, and then obviously Minister Hazzard, as a resident of the Northern Beaches, will also highlight some points that we want the community to have this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. So there were 12,374 tests reported to 8 p.m. last night, and again it is important and essential that we have high testing rates across the state, not only focused on Northern Beaches. But thank you very much to the Northern Beaches community who have come out and supported the public health response in such great numbers over the recent days. Of the new cases to 8 p.m. last night, 21 of the cases were locally acquired and linked to a known case or cluster. 2 cases are locally acquired and their source is under investigation, and 7 were acquired overseas in hotel quarantine. It is important that overall the cases are predominantly linked to the Avalon RSL and the Avalon Bowling Club, so it is essential that if you were at those events, that you maintain your isolation and your vigilance, and thank you for those who have come forward for testing. It is also important that the rationale for this action is to ensure that we decrease mobility of people and the opportunity for interactions between people in the Northern Beaches. So we also ask the Northern Beaches residents, obviously, to only leave home for those essential reasons outlined by the Premier, and we also request that people only limit their entrance to the Northern Beaches to essential reasons as well. Across the board, if we could maintain those high rates of testing, that will allow us to detect any unrecognised chains of transmission. In terms of the sewage surveillance, was positive on the 16th of December as expected, given the case numbers in this area. But that gives us confidence that this is a relatively recent introduction to the Northern Beaches, because the sewage sampling on the 10th was actually negative. So my key message is, if we can actually work together, follow the public health advice, and work together with business, the community and government, we can also ensure that we have a pleasant and happy festive season and New Year. The advice will change as we are going through a number of contact venues that have been identified as we interview cases. So again, I urge people to please check that New South Wales Health website, but also make sure you're regularly checking your phone. And when we're calling you, please get back to us promptly. The public health contact tracing team will be making lots of calls this morning, and it really assists us if we can tick you off the list as contacted, that you've got those messages and you are following the advice.
Thanks very much, Greg. I also want to thank the entire Northern Beaches community. It has been an amazing response just in the last 36 hours. The community have come out in great numbers to be tested. They have also obviously been on high alert. The restaurants, the cafes, the pubs, the clubs have effectively either closed or been in very minimal numbers. But these orders are now necessary because of the figures that we have seen to 8 p.m. last night. We will make sure that it is not any longer than necessary. But as Dr. Chant said, this is a very localised outbreak at the present time around the Avalon cluster, and every case seems to have some connection, some more tenuous than others, but some very direct to the Avalon RSL and the Avalon Bolo. Those who attended on the 11th at the Avalon RSL and 13th at the Bolo certainly need to come forward and be tested and to be on high alert and to self-isolate. But there is a list of other venues on New South Wales Health website, and I would encourage all of my fellow residents of the Northern Beaches to have a look at that website and make sure that you are, if appropriate, self-isolating, but certainly self-isolate and have a test. Last night I attended at one of the venues where we are doing the testing. I wanted to say that The response from residents is they know they have to do it and they are doing it. A number of people thanked the frontline health staff for all the work they were doing out in the rain, out in the weather yesterday, and they are seeing this as their duty, and they're very much being part of the response. Can I say, in a broader sense, certainly I think it's wise, a wise precaution for people across the Greater Sydney area to think about restricting their movement, as has been said. Restrict your movement in the next few days while we sort this issue out on the Northern Beaches. I'll now be working with our lawyers this afternoon to actually have those orders in place by 5 p.m. So again, this is specifically for the Northern Beaches in terms of legal orders at the moment. But as the Premier said, we will be taking advice from New South Wales Health, looking at how matters progress during the day, as one would expect, and determining whether any further steps are necessary. I would say to any of the Northern Beaches residents, I know it's disappointing, I share your disappointment. I was heading off to Queensland on Christmas morning. I'm not doing that now. My family members were wanting to get together up in Queensland. That's now cancelled. We're all going through this together, but please stick with what we're asking you to do, stick with the orders, stick with our requests. I know you'll be tempted to go out and to visit the bush or visit other parts of Sydney. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because we do not want on our Northern Beaches to be responsible for seeding this across Sydney or New South Wales or indeed anywhere else. Please stick with us on this. Thank you.
Questions?
Premier, have there been any cases since 8 p.m. last night?
Of course there have been, but obviously we're providing one daily update. It seems apparent to us that we'll have around the same number, if not more, cases tomorrow, and that's why we've taken the action we've had. In terms of the health website, can I please ask everybody to keep monitoring it, especially those of you who live on the Northern Beaches, as I'm certain new venues will come up as we contact trace, as we contact the people who are testing positive. We will make sure all the venues they've frequented are up on the website. In fact, everybody in Greater Sydney and New South Wales should be looking at the website, because even though you might live on the Northern Beaches, you may have gone to venues obviously across the state, whether it's in the regions or in Greater Sydney. So we are asking every citizen to make sure you're monitoring the health website to see which venues pop up during the day, which will suggest that you may need to go and get tested and stay isolated.
So what is the size of the Northern Beaches cluster now?
Well, if you add up, I'll ask Dr. Carey to give an update, but obviously given add on the number 23 to the previous number we'd had. But Dr. Chand, if you want to give us the final number as at 8 p.m. last night.
Look, I'll have to get back to you about the 8 p.m. last night. As you imagine, we're taking a keen interest in every single case. I think the key message for the community is certainly there are cases come in, as you expect, but the vast majority of the cases were linked to those exposures at those two sites. We have got announced in the release around an exposure at a gym, the Always Fitness, Anytime Fitness at Avalon. And can I acknowledge the great cooperation of that gym owner in providing data last night for us, and we've got those messages out through our usual messages out, and we will be contacting residents, people that went to that gym. So the key issue is that the majority of all of the cases that we were advised that we've got details on have been linked, except a small handful that still reside in the local area and have links, either residents of Avalon, been to the gym, or have some link to other people that are linked to the cluster.
So those two that are under investigation, they're still in the Northern Beaches?
Yes,
Yep.
so obviously there will be cases coming in every time, and I think this is really important that people understand that this is a moving feast and we need to reassess continually. But obviously what we are looking at closely is how many are linked to the sites and how many represent are not linked, because that gives us an idea of the broader community spread. To date, when I was briefed just before this, in terms of all of the cases we've got details on, there are basically 3 cases that were not specifically linked to the Avalon Bolo or the Avalon RSL. 2 of those were residents of Avalon. One clearly we have released around the gym and we're exploring that person was infectious whilst at the gym. And then there was another person who we're contact tracing some events to find out her exposure source, but both live in Avalon, and it may turn out that there are subsequent links to people that have been at the RSL. As you can imagine, we're dealing with large numbers and we need to cross-reference it. But can I thank the people that we're ringing, that giving us the time of, going through methodically your records and giving us that detailed information. And thanks to the businesses who have put the safety of their customers as a high priority and have those digital records that can provide rapidly to our contact tracing team. Thank you.
With that case at any time, Fitness, do you know whether that was a member of the gym or a staff member there?
The person attended the gym. As I said, that person, we have identified as our usual process, we identify when that person was infectious at the gym, but we also are, for all of our cases, looking at the potential exposure sources. So that's why our advice often has two elements. One, advice for those people that have been what we call close contacts of the case, but we also ask often people that may have been in there prior to the person acquiring their infection to get tested, because we're also looking for those people that might have inadvertently transmitted the infection as a source investigation.
Dr. Chandler, do you have any further updates or clues as to the source of the Avalon cluster, and has genomic testing yielded any further information?
So genomic testing, and again, can I thank the laboratory staff who have been working throughout the night. We have had some additional sequences which all confirm the data that it's the same cluster. So it's as expected, but it's always reassuring to get that information that shows your thinking is correct, that we have this one strain involved in the cluster. So there were a number of other genome sequences from cases associated with the cluster sequenced, and they confirmed to be linked to the original two.
Premier, when you consider further restrictions for Greater Sydney, what will be the triggers and what are the restrictions that are on the table?
Oh, look, obviously the health experts are concerned about potential seeding that may have occurred. So we know there were people from outside the Northern Beaches who attended both the Avalon RSL and the Bolo Club on the Sunday. So we're just making sure that we've considered that there hasn't been any spread of the disease in Greater Sydney, and that is evolving. So that will depend on the cases and the advice that we get during the day. If anything, of course, the response in Greater Sydney will not be anywhere near the tough position we've taken in relation to Northern Beaches, so I want to make that clear. But I do want to say to Greater Sydney, please, please do not go out tonight or the next few days unless you really have to. Please don't leave your home unless you have to. Obviously do the basics you need to do. Move around as you would. Do not go to the Northern Beaches if you live outside the Northern Beaches, unless you absolutely must, and limit your activities. So we're just asking people to be sensible and to use their common sense to make sure that if there is any seeding outside of the Northern Beaches, that we identify it and get that under control, because we do know, as Dr. Chandler said the last couple of days, that there were people who didn't live in the Northern Beaches who attended some of those events, and obviously you might be the close contact of someone who was at either of those events, which then means you could be susceptible. And we also know from the list of venues, there are a number of venues where people with the virus attended which are outside the Northern Beaches as well. So you might live on the Northern Beaches but have gone to appointments or gone shopping or gone to a hospitality venue outside the Northern Beaches, and those venues are listed as well. So because there is a level of concern about whether seeding has occurred outside the Northern Beaches, we're watching the situation, and if we need to, we may very well revert back to what we had previous to the last couple of weeks, where restrictions were eased, say from 4 square metres to 2 square metres. So they're the kind of things we will be considering and looking at and consulting with the relevant people today, but it will be based very much on health advice. In New South Wales, we always pride ourselves with giving people advance warning of our thinking. I'm not suggesting we'll take that decision tomorrow, but we'll certainly need to consider it during the day. But at this stage, we do need to maintain a very tough position in relation to the Northern Beaches, given the numbers we're seeing come through. So that's why from 5 p.m. tonight until midnight on Wednesday, essentially, people will be asked to stay at home and not leave their home unless it's for an essential reason. And obviously, people remember what we went through in March. It's very similar to that. So essentially, you can go out for those essential things we talked about, but apart from those reasons, you really shouldn't be leaving your home.
So does that include cafes and restaurants being allowed to do takeaway?
That's right. Of course, you can still do takeaway, but and people are used to that, and the cafes and restaurants are used to that as well, and some have adapted. And recently, you know, all of us know that when you go to venues now, they have all those options available, which previously they didn't. And again, I want to proactively thank the hotel industry, leaders in our religions and places of worship who proactively have asked their members and asked their organisations and businesses to actually revert to either closing down or reverting to a virtual position over the next few days, just to maintain that level of assurance and caution as well.
A lot of the states and territories have declared the Northern Beaches a hotspot. Have you spoken to any of them this morning? Do you think there'll be any more?
Look, I would have done the same had I been in their shoes in terms of declaring the Northern Beaches a hotspot, but I asked them to measure their response against that. The bulk of the geographic bulk of the state is unaffected. Greater Sydney at this stage, we don't have any evidence that there is any seeding yet outside of the Northern Beaches. So we ask all state leaders to consider that in their decision making, and to consider that given the type of Christmas period it is. And we just ask people to be measured in their response. I would have done the same had I been in their shoes in terms of declaring the Northern Beaches a hotspot. It is a hotspot. The number of cases and the fact that those cases are likely to be maintained or even go up is highly likely. I don't know that for sure, but the advice I've received to date suggests that we'll get at least the same number of cases, if not more, tomorrow at this time. So it is a hotspot, no denying that, but I ask state leaders to be measured in their response because to date there's no evidence that it's outside the Northern Beaches, although we are concerned and we're keeping a close eye on that to make sure that is definitely the case.
Have you spoken to any of them this morning?
A number of them have been in contact with me in the last couple of days.
Are you aware of any other changes there?
I don't know of any other changes, but certainly a number of them have been in contact with me.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
So is it time for New South Wales to stop taking in the bulk of Australia's return travellers, for Queenslanders to go home via Queensland, for Victorians to go home via Victoria?
Oh, look, I've made my position clear on that already. We just feel, I don't mind where Australians, which airport they go to, but my issue has always been the other states aren't doing enough. So I'm happy. I don't think we should discriminate who flies in where, because there could be family circumstances or for financial reasons you may not be able to get a flight elsewhere. So I understand that it's hard to discriminate Aussies against Aussies when they're coming into a port. But what I do request is that the other states lift their game and certainly take on more. I know Victoria's come, you know, to Premier Andrew's credit, they've been offline because of the shutdown down there, and Tullamarine's coming back online, so that's a positive. But I've always said from the beginning, we don't mind doing our bit in New South Wales. We just want the other states to do their bit as well, and that remains the case.
Back on the 5th of December, we had aircrew that didn't self-isolate, and they visited a number of venues across Mascot. Were all of those 13 people tested for coronavirus? Did they all come back negative? And why didn't we see any alerts to the public about venues that they visited?
Oh, look, I understand that police took a leadership role. I understand police took a leadership role in that operation, and I understand from the advice I got from police that all of them tested negative.
Will there be fines on the Northern Beaches if they breach the human?
Yeah, unfortunately, once a public health order goes in, if you do breach that health order, that comes with its penalties, yeah.
Do you know what they are?
It will be similar to what was in place during March.
What is
Thanks.
the rationale behind extending the further restrictions on the Northern Beaches until Wednesday?
The rationale is because the case numbers are not looking like they will be going down in the next 48 hours. And if we want a chance to give people a good Christmas and a good New Year's, we're trying to get on top of it more quickly. With this action, our thinking is to get on top of it as quickly as we can to give people a chance of having a normal Christmas. And so if all of us work hard, especially the people on the Northern Beaches, and they've been amazing because we asked them to do something without a public health order and they did it. But the public health order just reinforces how serious the situation is and allows us, if we need to undertake any compliance activity. It also provides a bit of protection for businesses who'll be able to take certain action because the public health order gives them cover as well in terms of their activity. So we're doing this to support the community in their efforts. We're doing this to support community organisations and businesses, but also to support our efforts in controlling the virus and hoping that it does not spread outside the Northern Beaches cluster. At this stage, the one positive that we can take is that it seems contained with the Avalon cluster. And that's what we need to maintain. And that's why it's important for people on the Northern Beaches not to move around with each other. And certainly we don't want people going into the Northern Beaches unless you absolutely have to. It is not a good place to be at this time. And we just ask people to refrain from entering that precinct.
What about the people that are in relationships? So one of them might live on the Northern Beaches.
Well, that's why we're saying there that the same rules applied to in March where that was allowable. Obviously, we're not going to stop those type of arrangements, but we just ask people to be sensible, and the public health, I think people were pretty used to what happened back in March, and we're just asking everybody to maintain that same level of caution and same level of adherence to the public health orders. The Northern Beaches community is essentially doing it already, but this gives greater direction and certainty and allows us to issue compliance to those minority individuals or organisations who choose not to do the right thing.
Quick one to Minister Hazzard, sorry. There's a class action launched on behalf of 10,000 junior medical officers. What's your reaction to that? They're being underpaid, overworked. Do you have concerns about that?
Look, right from the time that I became Health Minister, I've been working with the junior medical officers and trying to make sure that the circumstances of their employment are very workable for them. I haven't been briefed on the circumstances of this particular application, but I know that there have been a number of changes as a result of the discussions that have been taking place with junior medical officers. Certainly from our point of view, we want junior medical officers to not only love being at work, but also feel that the hours that they work are appropriate. When we know more about the actual details, I'll certainly say some more things about it. Can I just emphasise one thing back on to my locals on the Northern Beaches, and that is this. The lawyers are working with us now to put in place the orders for 5 p.m. But as a local, I send this message very clearly to all locals, and that is you should actually be not going anywhere in any substantial groups today, right from now, in fact, the last couple of days. So if you have got lunches with a whole lot of friends today, cancel it. If you were going out to big functions this afternoon, cancel it. If you were going to a gym, well, hopefully the gyms have closed. They'll be closed by 5 p.m, but I wouldn't be going to a gym. We have an outbreak at Avalon. We do know that the numbers are increasing. We do know that we need to be really, really cautious. And we do know that as a broader aspect, we have an obligation as Northern Beaches residents to get rid of this virus as quickly as possible to make sure it doesn't get out beyond the Northern Beaches. So just to all my fellow locals, take it really seriously. We've made comments in the last 36 hours about this as it started to roll out. We're making it very strongly today. And of course, we're looking at it very closely, and we'll take health advice for any further changes that are necessary, as the Premier says, in the next 24 hours. Thank you.
Given that it is our second lockdown, do you think that you will get the same level of compliance from the community?
In Northern Beaches?
Yeah.
The Northern Beaches community have already responded in massive numbers to the messages that we've been giving in the last 36 hours. I think that part of the issue has been that as we've tried to free up, the Premier and I and Dr. Chan have always said there is a risk. Our ports are a risk. We need to have crews coming back. We need to have people coming back from overseas Aussies, but that creates risks, and it's managing the risk. If we have large gatherings of people together, and that was where we've got to in terms of that's what we were trying to ensure the community could have more freedom. But we now have to realise yet again, as has occurred in other parts of the world, that this virus is extremely dangerous. And it knows how to get in through the points that we only learn about after it's done it. So we need people to just be with us on the journey. But I feel quite confident that the Northern Beaches community will be with us on the journey. Thank you very much, everybody.